This is years in the making of what it's come to now.
It was bad. It was really bad.
There were lots of internal issues.
This huge story of neglect and cruelty that goes back for quite some time.
There was a lot of sick animals that really needed medical treatment and they just weren't getting it.
There was no excuse for how it ended up.
Oxford's only animal shelter and animal control center is closed. Mississippi Critterz stopped taking in animals on March 4th following a series of abuse allegations and leaked evidence suggesting unacceptable shelter conditions. Critterz has experienced criticism since its establishment in 2018. Gail Tidwell Brown founded the shelter with the intent of protecting and finding homes for animals in Oxford. It had humble beginnings. Gail initially accompanied only by an animal control officer and kennel attendant LYNLEY LETSON. Brown seemed to run the shelter smoothly at first. It wasn't long, though, until clear violations of the city's contract became evident. Animal control was picking up dogs outside of the city, and dogs were not showing up on record. Letson hadn't even worked at the shelter a month before these patterns affected her shelter experience as both an employee and a customer.
I knew that some stuff was against city contract, and when you're contracted with the city, you have to abide by those mandates set in your contract, and that wasn't happening.
Letson was let go from Mississippi Critterz in early November for failure to attend a staff meeting that she was unaware of. She was replaced not long after by kennel attendant KITT Smith. Smith's complaints lined up with Letson's and included concerns about shelter conditions, understaffing, and poor staff education.
It was bad from the start. I mean, I had to tell these people who were supposed to know how to run a shelter that you couldn't stack wire kennels on top of each other with feces and cross-contamination all over the place with different litters of puppies. Rule 101. They did literally no research.
Smith worked at Critterz from September 2018 to December 2018. During this time, racially insensitive posts by Gail started circulating around the internet. Posts where she compared Obama to Curious George or mocked traditional Muslim headwear. Smith alleges that Brown would not allow people of color or mixed couples to adopt animals.
The city didn't care that Gail was racist and that she wouldn't adopt that people of color. Like, they just swept that under the rug when it came out to light. Now people are actually aware and they are doing something about it.
Brown never addressed these comments directly. The board asked her to step down as president in September of 2019. She remained involved with the shelter as a board member. This is where Jen Peterman steps in. Peterman ran the shelter from late 2019 until early March 2021. KATEY CUESTA worked at Critterz as the adoption counselor from August of 2020 to November of 2020. She was already working and took this second job on to get her rescue fix.
I remember the first time I walked in, I was just hit with the smell, and everything was just thrown everywhere. It literally looked like a hoarding case. I was like, what am I getting myself into? I stayed because Jen was so good at convincing people that this is just temporary, it's not always like this. And then the more I became close with the other employees, the more I was kind of informed, no, it's literally always like this.
Employees snapped photos of cats stacked in cages in an uninsulated storage room known as the back room. The sickest cats were brought from the back room and stacked in Jen's office. CUESTA took care of these cats.
There was this mom and just newborn kittens that came in. We intook them, and I immediately sent them back out to foster 2 days later. And they came back from the foster healthy. And I happened to go back into the cat room one day after everybody had left. I always walked through there to just make sure everybody was at least stable, even though most of them were dying anyways. And one of the kittens, they all had URIs, but one of the kittens' eye was so swollen shut that its eye had ruptured and its eyeball was just hanging from its head. We begged her to take them to the vet, and she flat out refused. She ended up moving the kitten to another cat room so the volunteers couldn't see her. And once we told the volunteers about the kitten, one of the volunteers actually took the kitten to the vet and was willing to pay for it all out of her own pocket. And when Jen found out, she called that volunteer screaming at her and made her bring the cat back without getting medical care. The cat died 2 days later. along with every other kitten in the litter.
These photos were included in a folder of proof of abuse and violation of contract compiled by concerned citizens and former employees, including CUESTA and former volunteer Emma LUTTRELL. The binder included several screenshots of Peterman's incriminating texts, photos of animals, and plenty of eyewitness accounts of neglect. Cats being denied medicine and hidden from the public, dogs being left in temperatures below freezing overnight, kennels being left uncleaned, and animal carcasses accumulating in the freezer. An internal investigation ensued in which conditions were deemed concerning, but no incriminating evidence of abuse was uncovered.
They had a whole PowerPoint presentation with video, pictures, statements. They went to the board, let them know about the problems. They came in and said they were going to do a cleanup and have vets come in, and they dismissed Jen Peterman, the director at that time. And me and my daughter participated in the cleanup. A lot of the other employees had quit and left. And so we decided we would stay and help clean it up because it seemed like they wanted those positive changes that we were really after in the first place. So within days, they had the director back on site and conducting adoption events out in the community. And that to me was appalling after what she had allowed to happen there and what she had contributed to there. And the fact that the board knew there was such a problem, that was just not okay. It's been very frustrating because we felt that the city wasn't really acknowledging the problem in a manner that was positive or, proactive.
We reached out to Peterman and got no response. All was quiet with the shelter until on February 13th, right at the start of Oxford's big winter storm, this photo of dogs encaged in the snow outside of Critterz started circulating around social media. Concerned citizens filed formal complaints with the Oxford Police Department several days later. On February 17th, an OPD conducted an inspection. The shelter released a statement the next day informing the public that the dogs pictured were on the last rotation to go to the bathroom and were not left outside overnight in the cold. Mississippi Board of Directors President Ainsley Smith thanked the shelter supporters and assured everyone that the photos on social media did not truly reflect the current conditions of the clinic. It was around this time that concerned citizen Leigh Ann Hubbard created the Oxford Animal Shelter Watchdog Group to advocate for the humane treatment of animals in the shelter.
A lot of people were doing things, but we needed a central place to gather and start sharing ideas and solutions. So I created a Facebook page and a Facebook group. I'm a marketer and a journalist, so I knew how to do that. And then it just snowballed. It did not go how I expected it to go at all because it blew up into this huge story of neglect and cruelty that goes back for quite some time and has been covered up and covered up and covered up repeatedly, including when it was brought before the board and the city in November of 2020. And they were trying to sweep it under the rug again when the allegations came out in February. So we started delving in and finding that this wasn't just disgruntled employees as we were being told, or it wasn't just isolated incidents. None of it could be explained away in ways that people were trying to explain it away.
The Oxford Police Department and Lafayette County Sheriff's Department conducted a joint investigation that yielded no evidence of criminal activity. On Thursday, March 4th, Oxford Mayor Robin Tannehill released a statement closing the shelter to all animal surrenders following a leaked phone conversation between City Shelter Liaison Janice Antonow, Mississippi Critterz founder and former board member Gail Brown, Mississippi Critterz former Vice President Tamara Austin, Mississippi Critterz President Ainsley Smith, and Mississippi Critterz Treasurer Natasha Scott. All members of the conversation admit to knowledge of the shelter's poor condition in this call. We reached out to Gail Brown and Janice Antonow and received no response.
And if they would put up kennel cards, those animals, we could be getting a lot adopted and getting them get out of there a lot sooner than sitting in a back room, which Jen Peterman refused to let me even take them in there in the back room in the beginning because she didn't want anybody to see what that back room looked like.
Mississippi Critterz held an emergency board meeting later that night in which they announced the resignation of Director Jen Peterman and voted to remove Gail Brown from the Critterz Board of Directors. On Tuesday, March 16th, the Animal Rescue Corps relocated the remaining 45 animals to the ARC Rescue Operations Center outside Nashville, Tennessee. The Oxford Eagle reports that their animals will receive medical exams and daily care until they're matched with ARC's North American network of placement partners in high adoption regions. According to Hotty Toddy News and the Oxford Eagle, the city hired Dr. Sarah Pisano of Team Shelter USA, LLC, for animal shelter consulting services on March 24th. Tannehill says the city and Lafayette County will pay a combined $25,000 to Pisano and Team Shelter USA as part of the contract, which includes an initial formal assessment and 6-month evaluation and advisement period. Pisano will provide coaching and guidance via Zoom meetings every 2 weeks and make recommendations regarding every aspect of shelter management and animal welfare. During the board meeting on Monday, March 29th, Tannehill announced the city's plans to transition the shelter into an animal resource center. The board voted to hire an animal peace officer, formerly called an animal control officer, and a second kennel attendant to care for dogs or cats picked up only by the officer. We reached out to Mayor Tannehill and received no response. Until then, the Oxford Police Department will act as animal control inside city limits, and Pisano will help Oxford with the specifics of this idea. Citizens can help by spaying and neutering their pets. What do citizens hope for the future of the shelter?
We would love to have more communication from the city and the county. There are still homeless animals out here.
Now we need answers on how we're going to move forward, how we're going to serve this community, the animals in the community, the citizens of the community, for the animals.
I hated it took it getting to the point that it did, but it should have happened years ago. Years ago.
Today, Mississippi Critterz is empty. No one knows for sure what will happen with the shelter. The watchdogs will continue to fight for the protection of animals, and Oxford will continue to develop a solution. Hannah Deere, NewsWatch Ole Miss.